Hello guys, I'm Raul Blaze. If you're new to my page, please like, subscribe and share. I talk about Caribbean culture, Jamaican culture, or anything diasporic. I focus on religion, food, culture, language, etc. I also spend a lot of time deconstructing the colonial lessons and the myths that we have learned and that we have. Today I want to focus on language, and I want to talk about what is considered eloquent or articulate. A lot of times in the diaspora, I'm going to speak for Jamaica and the Caribbean, whenever we use our Creole per se or patois or language derivative from both our ancestors and the colonial powers, it is often described as bad, as poor, and is referred to as not having the right amount of education or not being smart. Anyone who speaks patois, for example, in Jamaica, can be defined by this. There is a general acceptance for patois, but not in a formal sense per se. And the more, I'll say, ethnic or rural or colorful someone's patois is, the more they're classified as chat bad. This is because there are certain there are distances away from standard English. So the more you speak closer to standard English, even though what you're saying is grammatically incorrect, which is what chat bad should be, and even if you're twanging, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, you are classified as intelligent or smart. But the more you speak like someone from a rural part of Jamaica, you can be called backwards or baka baka or butu. And this is where the definition of being articulate and eloquent comes in. It is interesting because I should have mentioned before that I am a foreign languages teacher for many years. I'm a multilingual person. I write, read, and research in different languages. And is something in my teeth? No, in different languages. And I am exposed to language at a level that the average person isn't exposed to it. So we take meanings and we think of them in a colonial way. For example, being articulate has nothing to do with standard English or standard Japanese or Spanish or French or even patois. Being articulate has only to do with your ability to express yourself fluently and fluidly. But because this kind of expression was discouraged, the reason why we learned English per se wasn't because it was taught to us. Well, the reason why we didn't learn our West African languages was because it was prohibited on the plantation. At the same time, English language wasn't taught to us. So our Creoles and patois, etc., they were formed based on the linguistic nature and the pronunciation nature of our West African languages, but influenced for the most part by the commands and conversations in the colonial languages. So because there's this need to be proper, and proper is only seen in a colonial and colorist and racial way, someone who speaks patois cannot be considered as someone who's articulate. However, articulation has nothing to do with speaking like a particular class of people. Articulation has to do with being able to express your emotions. For example, it is ironic because if a Jamaican person wants to express anger or fear or love or joy or the first kind of emotions that shock them, the most natural way to express this is in patois. If I, as a Jamaican, if somebody frightens me per se or shocks me, and I say, my good Lord, I was shocked beyond my senses, that isn't articulate, right? It is articulate in terms of the fact that it is English language, but it's not articulate because it doesn't fluently and fluidly expresses one's feeling as a Jamaican. If a Jamaican say, Lord, me frightened so till me only drop out of my pants, that is articulate because you're able to express yourself in your language and paint it in a color that anyone who speaks your language naturally can understand. You understand what I'm saying? So one thing which is not articulate and is outside of your language parameters in terms of how you feel the language, that is considered articulate. However, if you speak the way that these emotions come to you, you can be described as not being articulate. Take a sip of my juice. So we have to reframe the conversation and get that notion of English being superior to Patois out of our minds. Now, I can see the pushback on this. Someone who, I'm gonna say, who is not intelligent enough or doesn't have the cognitive capacity, or someone who is just very obsessed with our colonial history, might say that I am saying that English isn't important, which is, I've never said that. That hasn't come out of my mouth since I've been sitting here. But that is the only way one can try to refute what I'm saying. Because if you say that I'm saying that English isn't important, you can have a bunch of Jamaicans who join with you and disregard everything I've said because you stuck to a point that I did not make. My point is that we should not discriminate on a language, and the word articulate and eloquent, these words do not have a language prerequisite. These words and phrases are dependent on the person's ability to say them fluidly and fluently. Now, we also try in Jamaica to shame and to prevent young children from speaking Patois, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my life. To the contrary, and I'm speaking as a language teacher, I don't know how many people on here speaks multiple languages, and I'm not bragging, or has taught them, but anyone who has taught languages or is from the language or from a language centric background will tell you that actually allowing kids to speak Patois and teaching kids in Patois actually improves their confidence in class, because we assume that every Jamaican child is exposed to English language 24/7. And we also assume that if a Jamaican child isn't exposed to the English language, that this is an indictment on them at a young age. No, this is not, because every child in Jamaica will learn English because it's a part of our formal system, whether it's school, sometimes church, work, university life. All of this requires standard English. So the child will eventually learn the language. You understand? There's never been any study that shows that kids who speak Patois only can't do English. As a matter of fact, people who are exposed to their native language as much as possible are better at learning other languages and also math, because this cognitive awareness is spiked by your ability to speak in something you're confident in. It boosts your confidence, right? So again, we're talking about being eloquent and being, when you can tell, say sun hot, don't it? But I love the sun, Melanin. So being eloquent and being, and also being articulate, these have nothing to do with the language that is spoken, and more to do with the language that comes closest to you and how you as a person can speak it freely, fluently, and fluidly. So that's one thing I want us to understand. But we are no longer enslaved. We are no longer colonized. Well, that's the next video. So we do not have to follow the rules of Bakermassa. We can embrace Patois for the love, for the beautiful language that it is. As a matter of fact, people ask me what is my favorite language out of all the languages, and I say Patois, because no other language can allow me the fluidity and the fluency that I need to express myself. Of course, the irony is that I'm doing this in English language. You see, because a Bakermassa, I have to do it in English language if you don't understand, but to know me I talk about. So yes, please be very confident of Patois, and do not think that being eloquent and being articulate has only to do with speaking standard English, okay? Big up on yourself.